Hello everyone, welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann.
And hello everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford. Welcome to the show. Well, no one ever thinks that he or she will end up in parish court, but it can and it does happen. In most cases, anyone arrested or ticketed on the West Bank usually ends up before a judge in the 2nd Parish Court in Jefferson. Last week, we started a great conversation with Judge Roy Cascio, a longtime presiding judge. He was first elected to Division A in November of 1995. Today, he's back with us again.
Many of you may be surprised to learn that in 2012 alone, there were over 47,000 new cases filed in 2nd Parish Court in Jefferson Parish. Today we're going to dig a little deeper with Judge Roy Cascio. We'll focus on practical and useful information about the kinds of cases that impact many of you. We'll also be taking your questions in the second half of our show.
That was a pretty impressive statistic that you just put out there. As an attorney, how do you decide if you're going to go to parish court or district court?
Well, it's interesting because these parish courts and city courts and many other parishes across the state of Louisiana, they're limited jurisdiction. In my field of practice, personal injury, contract disputes, you have the right to bring a claim in a parish or city court as long as you believe your claim is worth below a certain amount. In parish court, where Judge Cascio sits, if his jurisdiction is claims up to $20,000 per person, that could be contracts, that could be personal injury. One of the great things about parish courts is things move much faster. You're not behind the people who have jury trials that can take weeks. So there's practical aspects to it, and it applies if you're a small business and you're deciding whether or not you want to bring your claim against somebody else for money owed in parish or city court, or the main court, the 24th Judicial District in Jefferson Parish.
Okay, lots to learn on this show.
Lots to learn.
When we come back, Judge Roy Cascio of 2nd Parish Court for Jefferson will join us, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. It's part 2 of our program, and the discussion that we're having today is about parish courts, and in particular, 2nd Parish Court in Jefferson. We're trying to get a better understanding of how to navigate our way through it. John?
We are happy to welcome Judge Roy Cascio back to Power of Attorney. He joined us last week and was kind enough to stay to continue our conversation. Judge, thanks for coming back and continuing this very interesting discussion about a court that affects a lot of people every year.
Thank you very much for inviting me back again.
We were talking off camera about myths that a lot of people have, and one very important one we agreed was people who don't understand their obligations to show up to court after getting maybe a traffic summons, a traffic ticket. Why don't you explain a little bit about that?
Well, first off, that we didn't mention, your driver's license is supposed to have your current address on it.
Very important point.
So when
many people, they leave, they get an apartment, and they never notify the Department of Motor Vehicles,
correct.
For instance.
Or like when some of our kids go off to college or schools and all, and so they'll leave their home address with mom and dad. And that's fine as long as when the subpoena gets to the house, mom and dad understand to accept service. If they don't accept service...
Meaning when the sheriff or the constable or whoever knocks on the door says, I've got papers for Susie Jones.
Correct.
Mom doesn't say she doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah, if mom says she doesn't live here anymore, and that's the address you have on your driver's license, well then the courts will go ahead and issue an attachment on you if you don't show up on the day that had on that subpoena.
And what does that mean when they issue an attachment?
Well, that's a warrant for your arrest, and then it creates all kind of problems, as mentioned last week. After 30 days, your license is suspended. But at any point in time, if you get stopped for another traffic offense and they run the computer on you, you'll have an attachment on your name.
So let's say this young person does do something, and maybe they didn't want their parents to find out, but then that day comes when there is that knock on the door, and let's say that parent is just completely flustered, doesn't accept what they're being given. then makes a call to their son or daughter, their son or daughter has 30 days then to get in touch with law enforcement?
No, not from the time that the subpoena was delivered, but what the date on that subpoena.
Oh, the date, 30 days from the date on the subpoena.
Correct.
Okay.
The subpoena date will tell them when they're due in court.
Okay.
So if mom looks at the date but tells them they don't live here anymore, but then calls their child wherever they're at and said, look, you're supposed to be in court on such a date. Well, as long as they appear on that date, everything's okay. It's not a matter of not getting the subpoena as such. It's a matter of not being in court on the date that's on the subpoena.
That's when you could be held in contempt.
Correct.
Is that right?
And meanwhile, there's still going to be an attachment for your arrest if mom says, if she refuses the service and says you don't live there.
No, not refusing the service, but not showing up on the date that's on the subpoena.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood what you said a minute ago.
Yeah, no, as long as you show up on the date that's on the subpoena, everything's okay.
Very good.
So it's not, mom can say, no, they don't live here anymore. The sheriff makes that notation on the back of his paperwork and puts it in the court record. But as long as they show up on the date that's on that subpoena, they're okay.
Yeah, and by
Good, I'm glad we
signing,
clarified that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, by signing that though, you're not admitting anything. You're just you're saying that I have received
Correct.
this notice, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the notice, the subpoena. That's
subpoena.
not the citation or the ticket.
Okay.
Right.
You
We were talking about that in the last show. If the police officer is writing you a ticket for speeding or whatever it is, and you may dispute it, you may say, no, your radar got the wrong person, whatever your argument is, by signing the ticket, you're not admitting that you did something wrong.
Correct. That's just so that your signature is just like your bond. You're promising to appear in court on that date to answer to the charges, whether guilty or innocent.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Very
I'm
good.
sorry I cut you off.
No, well, it's so important because many times, I'm sure you see it often enough, people, they move, they don't give their current address. People have this idea that if I don't get served at my current living address, like somehow the court's supposed to hire a private investigator to figure out where you lived, 3 years ago, the last time you renewed your driver's license. If they can't find me, then that's their problem, even though my driver's license address is outdated. And then they forget about it. They never get that notice that might be mailed saying, whatever, you
Correct.
You missed your court date or whatever. So the moral of the story then is you have to keep your address updated. And if you got a ticket, understand it's not going away. You need to look into it, get a lawyer to look into it, get a family member who knows how to research the records in that parish courthouse, and address that one way or the other.
Correct. One of the common things that we do see, especially down here with a lot of people coming from all areas of the country for Mardi Gras and fishing and hunting and all, is they'll get a ticket and then they go back home. I don't know, New York, Pennsylvania, wherever. So I'm not worried about that ticket in Jefferson Parish. Well, if they don't show up, we issue the attachment. In 30 days, we send it to Baton Rouge. Well, now, 40 years ago, it might have been different, but nowadays, all the states are hooked up with the computer systems.
Things happen quickly, huh?
And then they go to renew their license at whatever state they're in.
California,
and
wherever. There's a
they've
flag.
got to come back to Louisiana.
To deal with that ticket.
You have to deal with it nowadays. There's no more, it's gone away if you don't go back to that area.
Yeah, you can't outrun it.
No.
Let's talk a little bit about court costs and what's involved. Explain a little bit about court costs.
Well, we get that question a lot. People get confused or don't understand. I want to pay the fine, but why do I have to pay the court cost? I'm pleading guilty. I'm not even. I'm either doing it over the computer, or I'm showing up the first night and pleading guilty.
Not going to trial, so why do I have to?
And the whole problem with it is, or with that philosophy is the whole system still has to handle that citation. The deputy wrote the ticket, then he sends it to the clerk's office for them to enroll it. Then they send it to the district attorney's office. We do bills of information in Jefferson Parish, where they prepare the paperwork to file in court and have the people served, and then the court has to deal with it. So all these agencies are handling those tickets. So it's not a matter of just calling up and saying, I want to pay the ticket. That's fine, but you might have had 20, 25 people touch that ticket since the time it was written before you can plead guilty. So that's why everybody pays court costs. Now what comes extra is if you plead not guilty, then subpoenas go out to subpoena witnesses and all. Now the costs go up.
Yeah, and so that could be pretty astronomical, right?
Well, the subpoena costs aren't that. Well, most of your tickets, unless it's involving an accident or a DWI, driving while intoxicated case, you're just dealing with yourself and a police officer. So you've got your date, and then they subpoena the police officer. I'm not sure if it's $7.50 or $15 for a subpoena. But if you have a case where there was a big accident, you might have 7 or 8 witnesses, all of a sudden you're up to $100 when you change your court date for new subpoenas to go out. So it could get expensive.
It could get.
But,
Yeah, and I'll just add to the discussion, depending, I know sometimes court costs in traffic court can add up. That plus the fine can add up, and depending on how serious, what the costs are, if you can find out, you may be able to find out what it all is going to cost. If it's several $100s, it may be worth your while to consult with a lawyer who does traffic stuff. Now, I personally don't do it. I work with lawyers who do, and my understanding is a lot of times, if the police officer or if somebody in the system doesn't dot their I's and cross their T's, there may be a good defense. Even if maybe you were speeding, there may be a good defense because something not done right. Now, I'm telling people take responsibility and drive safely. Don't misunderstand me, but that doesn't mean that the system gets a pass if the system doesn't do its job properly. But you can consult with a lawyer, and if you have a legitimate reason to fight a ticket and keep that off your driving record, that may affect your insurance rates. So it's just something to consider. I'm giving that counterpoint. I'm not trying to take a position on the issue.
I'm not here to profess that just because you got a ticket, you should go in and plead guilty. Okay, and in fact,
I appreciate you saying that, Judge.
Our funding for Second Parish Court and for First Parish Court has nothing to do with the number of tickets we collect or find people guilty or anything to do with our civil cases. Our funding is strictly from a budget that we submit to the parish of Jefferson. There's never any questions in there. How many people you found guilty this year or whatever, you know?
That's great.
So and we don't get any, Second Parish Court, we get some building fees and some security costs and judicial expense funds, which are minimal amounts in there. But I'm not here, like I said, to profess that you plead guilty. But what a lot of people do is they think by pleading not guilty, they're going to get away with it. And so they'll plead not guilty, subpoenas go out. And what inevitably happens if they'll do this, because with the volume we have, we'll give a few continuances, they wind up missing a court date because they forget you got to show up to court. And all of a sudden now, when they got an attachment on them, if they don't get in timely, the license is suspended. When they do come in, then we have to have a contempt hearing. Then we may charge them $100, $200 for contempt. Right. So all of a sudden it starts mounting just because they think they can beat the system.
Yeah.
And a handful of people may beat the system, but the vast majority,
That's the exception. That's the
vast
exception.
majority are not going to do it.
And so when that final bill does come, and let's say I can't pay it all, then what?
Well, most courts, as we mentioned, I believe it was last week, have some type of payment plan that you
There
can
is a
pay.
payment plan.
Now, again, some courts may want it all done in 2 months or 3 months' time. Some courts, in Second Parish Court, we just look at $50 a month. You come in, pay your $50. Now, if you don't have your $50, you still have to show up for court.
Still show up.
And explain to the judge why you don't have it. We don't hold anybody in contempt for not having money. It's for not showing up for court that we hold people in contempt for.
Okay, well, we have to take a quick break. Very important point. We have to take a quick break. Coming up next, we will answer your questions. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hello Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It is part 2 of navigating Second Parish Court in Jefferson. And you all have lots of questions for Judge Roy Cascio. We're going to get straight to them. And Judge, I want to pick up with where we left off just before the break, where we're talking about the fact that there are payment options for people who may get that bill, and that includes court cost and all that. But what if I can't pay for representation and I need representation? Then what sort of options are available?
Okay. Not all cases are you entitled to a court-appointed attorney, and the first requirement is that you can't afford your own attorney. Basically, in criminal matters, any case that you can be sentenced to jail for, you're entitled to a court-appointed attorney if you qualify. And it's totally different in civil cases. So we don't supply court-appointed attorneys in civil cases. There are some law clinics. Loyola has a law clinic. I'm not really that familiar with them, what the requirements are. There are some people that take a sliding scale according to what your income is in civil cases. But the main in criminal is if there's a possibility that you'll be sentenced to jail, then if you qualify, you're entitled to a court-appointed attorney.
Basically, to qualify, that means you can't afford it. It's
correct, and there's a scale, income scale, and in Jefferson Parish we have the Office of Public Defender. The judges in Jefferson Parish themselves, we don't appoint attorneys to handle indigents. They go to the public defender's office and fills out an application. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what the application is on, but it deals with their income and expenses and everything.
If somebody shows up at court for their hearing and they say, I need a lawyer, someone at the courthouse will tell them who to talk to, how to find out if they qualify for a court-appointed defense attorney?
Correct.
Okay, good.
A lot of times they won't until they show up for trial, and it's you know, you start talking about like your DWI cases, mm-hmm. okay, and so they go in and they'll talk with the DA, they're not unrepresented, and all of a sudden they come out in the court and they're asking for a continuance, and the DA's noted on the record, or he'll come out and tell the court, he's asking, he thinks he needs an attorney, judge. So I'll explain to him where to go, give him the address, and the bailiffs will show him where to go if they're still confused on where to go to fill out the paperwork.
Do a lot of people try to represent themselves in parish court?
A lot of people, yeah. And civil and in criminal, we have a lot of unrepresented people, okay. Plaintiffs and defendants in the civil matter.
Okay, we're going to get to our viewer questions. Our first one comes from Tracy. She says, why can't I pay my ticket online or mail in a payment? I got a ticket for driving 15 miles over the speed limit. Well, again, as I believe it was last week we discussed, that is one of the requirements the legislature has put in, that if it's 15 miles or more over the speed limit, it's a mandatory court appearance. And I believe, I'm not sure if I really looked it up, but I believe it's a real safety factor that they feel once you're going 15 miles an hour or more over the speed limit, you're really starting to create a problem, so they want to make you have to show up and see what the system looks like, and hopefully they make an impression upon you. Yeah, okay, all right. Our next one is from Martin. He says, I borrowed my uncle's car one weekend and I got a ticket for an expired brake tag. Why do I have to pay the ticket if it's not my car? Martin wants his uncle to pay this ticket.
And believe it or not, we do get that question quite a bit in Second Parish Court. And the problem is when you take a vehicle on the streets of the state of Louisiana, it's your obligation to make sure it fits within all the laws. You have to make sure it's insured. You have to make sure it's got the license plate, the current brake tag and all. It's your obligation, not the owner of the vehicle.
Wow, well, we have been warned.
Yeah.
Yeah, so look at that inspection sticker and
Yeah.
at least ask, hopefully verify the car's got the
Well,
required insurance.
If you have your own insurance, you know, on your car, then you're covered. But a lot of people don't have insurance on themselves or a car, so they go to borrow somebody's car.
Right.
But that's when you need to ask.
And just to clarify, if you have car insurance that covers you and your vehicle, if you borrow somebody else's vehicle, your car insurance on your car will follow you and cover you and protect, and it should solve that concern regarding insurance. But look at the brake inspection sticker on the car windshield.
Correct.
For example.
Right.
And look at the license plate, see if the license is
And I'm not sure if all auto insurances have that, but I know most of them do. So you need to check your own policy to make sure you're covered if you drive somebody else's vehicle.
Okay, all right. Another question from author. It says, a friend and I got into an altercation. He gave me a broken nose. I filed a claim against him, but now I want to drop the charges. We both received a trial notice. Why can't I drop the charges?
And again, we do get that regularly, not as much as the question before, but people don't understand when it's a criminal offense, it's actually the state of Louisiana is filing those charges against you or the defendant. It's not the victim. The victim is a victim, but it's totally up to the state of Louisiana. It's the criminal code, and it's totally within the jurisdiction or the purview of the district attorney's office whether to proceed with charges or to drop the charges. You can tell a district attorney you don't care to show up, you don't care to be a witness, but that's only a statement to the district attorney.
It's really out of your hands, is what it sounds like you're saying at that point.
Correct, totally.
And one of the good public policy considerations there, one of the reasons why I believe this has withstood the test of time over centuries is, for example, the domestic abuse case. You know, the wife gets beat up by the bully husband. They let the husband out of jail, and under threat of more beating, she says, he's reformed, I've forgiven him, I don't want to pursue it. And the state wisely, in my opinion, says, it's not your call, ma'am. We got the photos of the bruises, we got your statements, this thing's going forward.
Correct. I'm sure that's had a lot of input on why it's developed that way and evolved. And you know, the district attorneys take that very seriously.
They take a very strong.
And actually, if the victim doesn't show up, the district attorney has a right to request that they be attached and a warrant be placed on them to be brought to court.
Well, this sort of gets into the whole communication issue. Just sticking with Arthur for a moment here. What is allowed in terms of the person who is suing, the person being sued, contacting the DA, contacting the judge? What's allowed?
Well, with the district attorney's office, since in the criminal matter, that's the other side, the victim, who's the main witness probably, has a right to talk with anybody they want. The defendant, again, since it's the other side, the district attorney represents the state, and the defendant is on this defendant, he technically has a right to talk with the district attorney if the district attorney wants to talk with him. Because those are the two sides. The judge is in the middle, the judge is trying the case, the judge is impartial. So the judge really can't have any communications with either side unless everyone's present. And a lot of times somebody will send you a letter, or they'll call up and want to talk to you at the court, or say, leave a message with your secretary. I'd like to meet with the judge. A lot of this, sometimes these defendants, but you have to tell them. Usually the staff will handle it. No, the judge can't talk with you unless all parties are present. And that's another thing. Showing up for trial or showing up for status conferences. That's when, and an example I use is like playing a ball game. You need both sides to show up to make any progress. So when one side doesn't show up, you can't even have a conversation to find out anything about the case with the other side. And so some defendants don't understand it. It may be just for us all to get together and see if we want to have a conversation. If we do, then maybe we make progress. But
that conversation cannot take place unless both sides are present.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, and the judge isn't a side. The judge is in the middle. So both sides have to be present, meaning the plaintiff and defendant, or state and defendant.
Okay, we have a question from Winston who says, I was involved in a hit and run and I was pulled over again. My court date is in 2 weeks. I want to plead not guilty before the court date in lieu of appearance. Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I plead guilty in lieu of appearing in court?
In Second Parish Court, and I'm not quite sure, I'm sure it's the same way in First Parish, yes, especially with tickets and citations, and in misdemeanors too. Civil is different, but in the criminal matters, if there's no attachment on you and it's before your court date, you can show up and plead not guilty at any time. Now you have to show up Generally, we won't do it over the phone because we want your signature on the subpoena showing that you showed up. Now, there are special instances where we do get people that are out of state and they'll call up, I want to plead not guilty. We'll tell them, send us a letter, and then we'll mail you your subpoena and give you your court date. But other than that, local people, you have to show up, but they can show up anytime before their arraignment and go to the clerk's office and get a trial date in the matter.
Well, gosh, Judge, I feel like I've learned so much in these last 2 weeks. Really appreciate your time. And for those of you out there who need a little bit more information, we want to put up a screen so that you can know exactly how to contact Second Parish Court there in Jefferson Parish. There's the website address, or of course, you can always go to johnredmannpoa.com/Jefferson Parish Court to get all the information that you need to know. Judge Cascio, thank you so much for being on the program. Great having you here.
I appreciate it. Thank you all very much for asking me.
All right. Well, be sure to join us next week when we'll delve into another hot legal topic. Until then, be sure to visit us online at johnredmannpoa.com.
And of course, we like to include all of you in the conversation. So start sending your questions through Facebook, Twitter, and email. And visit our website for more information about everything discussed on the show. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on John Redmann, Power of Attorney.